What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, looks like we could have a new contender enter the console market. That's right. Yesterday, we had some information kind of leak out there around benchmarks for what could be a new game system from Valve, and based on some of the specs that are getting out there, this might surprise some people, and we'll look over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about the Switch 2 and a third-party game that people were pretty excited to see, but well, after some demos happened at Gamescom, some major concerns have now come up around it. And we'll also be talking about the Analogue 3D, because the thing is supposed to be shipping out, well, now. And we got an update. And it turns out we're not going to be seeing that thing for a little while. We'll go over all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with a rating that was spotted from the ESRB for Metroid Prime 4. You can see this is posted. This is by Nintendo, just saying that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond has been rated by the ESRB. Animated blood, violence, in-game purchases, rated T. In-game purchases has come up, it's thrown some people off. We've seen this for multiple different games. Donkey Kong Bonanza has had it, Mario Party Jamboree, Xenoblade Chronicles X, there are others as well. This is the Switch 1 version, keep in mind that's the rating has spotted on, and you can buy the upgrade path to the Switch 2 version, so that would kind of, I guess, technically be in-game purchases. I don't think you're going to start up Metroid Prime 4 and all of a sudden there's a cash shop to accelerate your progress in the game for experience or nothing like that. No, what's good about this though is when we see a rating for the ESRB, we start to think, okay, we are close to not only a release date, but also it coming out. So I'm now thinking Metroid Prime 4 is coming out before Kirby Air Riders. What a twist that would be, where I thought this was going to be towards the end of November. Maybe we see Metroid Prime 4 either at the end of October or like that first week of November. So I guess now we're just going to wait for this general direct to pop up with hopefully our release date for Metroid Prime 4. Also, we did get a surprise release for the Rogue Prince of Persia, this over on Gematsu. We also had like a new trailer and stuff for it, saying the Rogue Prince of Persia has left early access and launched for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC. That's through Steam, Epic Games Store, Microsoft Store, and the Ubisoft Store. All kinds of digital storefronts to pick from there for $30. It also has gone into PlayStation Plus and Game Pass. Switch 2 and Switch versions are planned for release later in 2025. Now, this is pretty cool because this is from the developer who made like the DLC for Dead Cells, and that was a very good DLC expansion for that game, so there's some talent behind this, and because it's been in early access for a while now, it feels like, they've had a chance to iron out any of the issues and balancing and other aspects to it, so this should be a pretty like high-quality release. It going into PlayStation Plus and Game Pass makes it clearly more accessible, and I have those services. The problem is, right now I'm playing Sword of the Sea, and then next week I'm going into a bunch of other games, so there's a lot of stuff to play right now. Maybe if I can wrap up Sword of the Sea here pretty soon, I can check this game out a bit before we get into next week when things like Metal Gear Solid Delta and Lost Soul Aside start dropping. It's a tough problem to have. There's too many games to play. Oh, and speaking of another surprise drop, during that Microsoft stream that they had at Gamescom, we had this announcement from Square Enix. Yeah, Triangle Strategy is now available. That's on Xbox and Xbox on PC, as well as PlayStation 5. And I mean, this is just it's just a good tactics-based game, tactics strategy RPG. It plays into kind of the old days of Final Fantasy Tactics, but using that HD 2D style that, while I think they've been using it quite a bit, it's still good. It still looks great here with Triangle Strategy. It looked awesome on PC. It came out first on the Switch, and when it went to PC, of course, you could raise all the settings and resolution and stuff. Here on the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series, it should look better than ever. So a cool, fun drop kind of out of nowhere. Right now, it's 30% off, and that's for PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass members, I believe. And then later on, it'll go back up to its standard price of $59.99. So good tactics-based RPG to check out, especially if you're hanging out waiting like me for the Final Fantasy Tactics Ivalice Chronicles. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a new console that seems like it's poised to enter the scene, and that's from Valve. And the PC gaming space right now, with the price of video cards that are even years and years old now, and just kind of putting a PC together, even with older parts, it's quite expensive, to the point where I think there's an entire avenue that's been opened up for a company to come in like Valve and do what they did with the Steam Deck, but with the living room scene, as in create a system that's not the most cutting edge thing, but is good enough, have that ease of use with their Steam OS, and pair it with a controller, and maybe put it out there for a more affordable price point. Well, we can see this is over on, sadly, it's Bradley's account, who's been following along with a lot of the different things from Valve, but certainly Fremont, which has been long speculated to be Valve's kind of set-top box, their console. And we know Valve with the Steam Deck, they did a good job kind of slotting that in with its price point. Again, not using cutting edge materials, opting instead to use things that have been around for a little while and then almost repurposing them, pairing it with their OS, and putting it out there at starting at $400, which was great for the Steam Deck, and it's worked well since then. Well, here with this Fremont build, there were some benchmarks that were found, and some of the specifications to go along with that. So it is a custom AMD chipset with 6 cores, 12 threads, the processor code name being Hawk Point 2. And the thing that's throwing a lot of us off is the memory being labeled at 8 gigabytes. Now, from there, we have found that the video card that would be used here, it's not going to be, say, an APU with kind of that built-in GPU alongside the CPU, in which case it would share the same pool of memory, similar to what the Steam Deck does. No, the RX 7600 is what's being pointed out here with a dedicated card that would not share RAM. Instead, it would have its own high-speed video memory, like you would expect from a typical video card. So while I still think the 8 gigabytes is a little suspect for the system RAM, and I almost wonder if maybe that's just something that's being read wrong or thrown off, it's still something to keep in mind there, that it won't necessarily be tapping that when playing games for the GPU side, okay? That'll have its own stack to kind of pull from. So we have the semi-custom CPU where it was almost like this APU where they removed the iGPU and instead are slotting in a dedicated RX 7600. And then on top of that, we can see some of the images here of what we believe to be the controller. Looks almost like a Steam Deck without the screen, so you would still have those touchpads at the bottom, and I wasn't a huge fan of that Steam controller they put out there where you had like the big almost circle touchpad. It didn't work for me. I like something a bit more traditional, kind of like this. Although I'm curious about how it's going to feel if you have those touchpads there. But still, they will have some sort of controller to pair with this, all coming from Valve. And I'm sure there are going to be many questions around some of the choices when it comes to hardware from Valve. However, I think they learned a lot from the Steam Deck, and that's the pricing was probably the most interesting part to the mainstream consumer base that may have bought into it. See, the Steam Deck, while it still wasn't an overwhelming seller as in, oh, it sold 40 million systems, it being able to sell, say, 4 or 5 or 6 million units as kind of this more niche device that Valve didn't even put into the retail storefronts. It was ordered through Steam or through their website, and that was sort of it. They just, as orders came in, they filled them, shipped them out, and that was that. But in that case, the $400 starter price was very, very enticing for customers because you could just experience games on Steam without having to build out a PC that, yes, now, I mean, if you build a PC from new parts, you're probably going over $1,000 for something that's like decent. So with the Steam Deck coming in there, yes, with a lower quality screen, even like 800p, the idea was you buy it and it just works. And I think that's the same thing they're going to do here with their console, where it'll probably be using 3-year-old hardware. All right, while they're going to customize some stuff, but they're going to build the OS alongside of it so that it can tap into those parts more so than if you had just Windows running. The only thing is, this benchmark had Windows running, so another part that's throwing a lot of people off, although that may have just been a benchmark that they wanted to run with Windows because it should be able to dual boot Windows, and I assume like the Steam Deck do a lot more than just what it looks like out of the box. So what's the expectation here? Well, I feel like they're building a 1080p to 1440p box, most likely, and I think it would be great if they could target $450 to $500, all right? And it's gonna come down to, I'm sure, the storage size. Maybe you can opt for less storage and even get down to 400. That would be somewhat shocking to me. I'm kind of thinking it comes in at a $500 price point, and their big pitch is you buy it, you plug it in, you turn it on, and it works. Your Steam library is there. You can take advantage of any of the Steam sales that happen, and it's not something where you have to necessarily debug constantly or run into issues and figure things out. I guess you'll probably even have a some sort of like Steam console ready tag that you can pick through with the storefront. Again, ease of use, cheaper than what it costs to build a PC, and just being able to plug it in and it just works. So when will this happen? When will we see it? I think this year. Will it come out this year? That's a better question, but I kind of feel like the reveal is coming up here pretty soon, and this should be pretty exciting just to see what Valve can do sort of in that space where it's a $500, maybe even less box to compete with PCs, but also on the console side. Next up, let's talk about the Switch 2 at Gamescom, as there were a couple of games that specifically have been pointed out from the third-party side. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade and Elden Ring. Both games were present at Gamescom where people could play them. So we figured, okay, this is the first time we're going to see them be playable. How are they going to perform? What kind of first impression are they going to make on media? Well, one game did very well. That's Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. In fact, it seemed like everyone who played it said it was a great experience. This is gonna be awesome when it comes out. Some weird dithering around the hair and stuff, but for the most part, the characters, like the rest of them, looked higher quality. It was smooth. It was a good experience. Great. The problem came into play with Elden Ring. So in docked mode, it wasn't as bad. And I say it wasn't as bad because the handheld experience was borderline broken according to just about everyone who played it. So it was garnering headlines like this from IGN, where they say Elden Ring on Switch 2 is a disaster in handheld mode. They say frame rate drops were significant when turning the camera whilst exploring outside the tutorial area, and this combined with a confusing button layout on the Switch 2 made combat confusing and exploration fairly dispiriting. They also weren't allowed to record gameplay at the booth, probably due to this fact. And yeah, that was the running sentiment, as I saw GVG also had a chance to at least play it, but weren't able to record it. Same with Nintendo Life. So they just kind of blocked you off from getting the camera out and filming it with handheld mode or doing direct feed capture because they did have a docked setup for it. From what I was hearing, docked, it was better. Still a lot of frame rate issues, and with handheld mode, when you were outside of any enclosed spaces like buildings or caves or something, it just kind of became unplayable. And look, Elden Ring, if you play it on the Xbox One, it's not great, but it sounds like somehow the Xbox, we'll even say Xbox One S, you can look up benchmarks for that and frame rate counts on places like Digital Foundry. It sounds like even that version was running better than the Switch 2 version. And that doesn't make any sense at all to me. Now, the PS4 would sit at about 30 FPS and would have dips, but it also doesn't sound like it was anywhere near as bad as what we're hearing about for the Switch 2. So here is the hope now, is that either A, the game doesn't come out till next year and they have more time to try to fix this, or B, they show up with a better demo here soon to another event and it just works much better across the board. So what could that be? Well, PAX West is coming up, and then there's Tokyo Game Show, but Tokyo Game Show is at the end of September. The other part would be they do have media appointments set up, or media events that are closed behind closed doors, and they have embargoes in place, and maybe there's just a better build to play there. But that's the first impression we have right now. Final Fantasy VII Remake, good. Elden Ring, disastrous. And that would be a real shame because FromSoft has another Switch 2 game coming out next year with the Duskbloods. So that's not a great way to get things started here with Elden Ring struggling just to run on the system, because that, when you have timing and stuff involved in a game like that is already really difficult, it's gonna make it even worse for people. And then the Duskbloods being a multiplayer game, that's not going to be great. So here's hoping they can figure this whole thing out with Elden Ring and at least get it to what people were expecting it to be, which is probably 30 FPS and mostly smooth gameplay for what they can with Elden Ring and FromSoft with their history all the way around. Next up, let's talk about those ROG Xbox Ally handhelds, as we did get full details for the most part. The pricing, while Microsoft's being kind of coy about it, seemed to leak out through online retailers. But we'll start from the top, as they had an entire trailer kind of detailing some of this stuff that they put out online. And that's with the release date. It is coming out October 16th, 2025, as we saw through D-Labs, where they put that release date out there. We have the base Xbox Ally, that's the white model, AMD Ryzen Z2, 16 gigabytes of RAM, 512 gigabyte SSD, and a 60 watt-hour battery. On the opposite side, we have that ROG Xbox Ally X. That is the AMD Ryzen AI Z2 Extreme, 24 gigabytes of RAM, 1 terabyte SSD, and an 80 watt-hour battery. So you will just get better battery life for the most part out of the Ally X. And it is very similar to what we have now with the ROG Ally X, minus the Ryzen AI Z2 Extreme. And To go along with this, Microsoft, while Asus has been kind of handling the hardware side, Microsoft has been doing a lot on the software side that should also, I figure, trickle over into the other PC handhelds right now, this Xbox full screen experience. It starts up when you unlock either handheld, and it doesn't load any processes that are not required for gaming. They say it saves about 2 gigabytes or so of just RAM and resources. The handheld compatibility, that's their new marketing term for games that have been tested to play on the handheld sort of in this environment. They say thousands of games have been tested, but I'm sure people will be checking in and trying out all kinds of stuff when these eventually come out. The AI-powered enhancements for the X, you may have noted that I mentioned the Ryzen AI Z2 Extreme. With that comes auto super resolution for upscaling games. So as you could tell, games that aren't necessarily equipped or set up for upscaling, this should at least be able to make it look better. And then highlight reels. So I guess just automatically recording things you do so you can capture your awesome gameplay moments that happen. Pricing is the big question, and we haven't necessarily seen it yet. All right, so while these listings have gone up. Right now, they're sitting at about $10,000 as placeholder pricing, but the ROG Ally, that's again the lower end white model, $550, and then the ROG Ally X, $900. Those two prices were shared online ahead of the placeholder prices being put in. So that's kind of what we're expecting. $550 for the white Ally. That's actually not terrible, just based on where the PC gaming handheld space is, although I think that's a 720p device. But that might be enough for some people. The Ally X, I think, being the more power user handheld, is what people are going to be more aspiring to get. But it's $900, so I was like, geez, that's where we are. Anyway, there still seems to be confusion around certain Xbox-only games playing natively, and they might just end up streaming. So there are games that are specifically set to Xbox and not on PC, especially backwards compatible games like original Xbox or Xbox 360 titles. Those don't seem to work here. So you would have to stream, and that's still kind of the problem Microsoft runs into. It's still kind of scattered when it comes to what games work and what games don't work from your current library of games, especially if you've been there since the 360 days, or even just maybe all of a sudden you had like this retro kick, you want to go back and start buying older games that are backwards compatible on your Xbox Series system. Maybe you did that a year ago. Well, most of them probably don't work on this ROG Ally handheld, and that's something Microsoft really needs to get figured out going into next generation. But we'll look towards October 16th for these to come out, and we'll look for hopefully a price point to be shared in the next week or two. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Analogue 3D, and go ahead and take a guess as to what I'm about to tell you, because it's not that it's coming out on time again. No, yeah, it's that it's been delayed for the third time. This over on their website, where they say Analogue has been moving at maximum pace, processing shipping to everyone who has been patiently waiting. Unexpected, uncommon issues are rare, especially in a negligible degree under esoteric circumstances. I don't know why they keep coming up with all these phrases for explaining logistics behind the scenes of, let's face it, like tariffs and other things that everyone's trying to deal with here. Anyway, we're ensuring every detail meets our standard. Nonetheless, we know this sucks. Another delay, announced late. After months of patience, we feel it too. Analogue 3D has been in development for 4 years, obsessively. It's at 99%. Hardware system packaging, the full kit, been set for months. The last 1% is where we're focused. This has moved our shipping date to Q4, intentionally set conservatively. We're pushing without pause and appreciate everyone's patience and trust. Analogue will always deliver, delays or not. It's a commitment to our standard of care. So who knows? I did say Q4 now. It could come out in December at this point for all I know. I'd like to think it's sooner than that, but I thought this thing was going to be out, like at the beginning of the year or something. It feels like a long time ago that I set that pre-order. So at this time, we still haven't seen the thing functioning at all, and all we've seen are just delay after delay after delay, and Mod Retro now entering the scene. It's like they might get their system out before Analogue does, and I thought we were already going to have this thing months ago. So who knows what to even think about the Analogue 3D situation. It's kind of like, all right, let's just hang out and I guess wait for it to eventually ship out. And they did leave a link at the bottom of this to cancel your pre-order or anything if you would like to. I'm going to keep mine because at this point, I gotta see it when it finally comes out, and we're gonna have to cover it here on the channel because it's been like a whole saga now of just getting the thing to ship, get the tracking number. So we'll see what happens here, hopefully soon. Otherwise, my advice to them, just put out some footage of the thing actually functioning, because now people are just trying to figure out if this is even real. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, how much do you think the PS6 will be in just US dollars? Okay, $800 plus is 42%. Wow. 35% say 700, 20% say 600, 3% very hopeful out there, really hopeful at $500. I think it's gonna be 600, but I understand why right now, after Sony raised the price of the PS5, which I made a dedicated video to that after it had happened yesterday. So check that one out. I'll actually link it again at the end of this video if you'd like to see more about that. But now we are sitting at a system with the PS5 Pro with a disk drive over $800. I think they're going to do some stuff with the PS6 to try to get to $600. Part of that being they'll actually subsidize it, where they're not really doing that with the PS5 Pro. And it'll just be an all digital system and the disk drive will be separately. So really, if you want it all together, it'll probably be closer to $700. Weird times right now in gaming. It is. We've only seen prices of consoles that some of us bought 5 years ago, even almost, with the PS5, only go up in price. The digital version, $400 to $500 now in the span of 4.5 years, almost 5 years. It's absolutely wild stuff right now. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Medallion, who says, it was pretty bold of Jeff to say that E3 lives on through something like Gamescom after such a mid-bunch of reveals or updates. Some decent things, but not much megatons. So I think the way I think you could say E3 lives on through Gamescom isn't even with the presentation like we just saw with Opening Night Live. Certainly not. Like the energy, the excitement, the reveals of E3, it's gonna be very difficult to ever match that again. And the only thing that's a real shame is future generations as we go along, they're just never gonna know any of that with what E3 was. You know, you can show them videos, but even then it's like, you kind of have to either be there in the moment watching the stream or watching it on TV, or actually being there to really get that experience and that feeling. No, instead with Gamescom, E3 living on through Gamescom is more about the in-person stuff. So like 300,000 some odd people attend Gamescom, and you'll get things like, oh, people will go hands-on with Elden Ring when it's clearly not ready to show, and we get reports around that. Or Final Fantasy VII Remake, hey, it plays well. Kirby Air Riders plays awesome. We get these kind of impressions immediately, right? Or Lego Batman, awesome video around that, by the way, just footage. Looks like another Arkham game. Like, it's crazy. So that's the kind of stuff where you get the in-person meetups and collaborations that happen that wouldn't normally happen if it was all just Summer Game Fest and it's all through streaming and you never actually meet up with anyone. So it's more the trade show spirit, certainly not the presentation spirit. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here on a card. Or maybe you want to hear more about that PlayStation 5 price increase that happened yesterday, I'll leave that right below it. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.